Welcome to the Chilliwack.tech meetup. Thanks so much to our sponsors that are helping us with this on a monthly basis. We have the Chilliwack Economic Partners, Chilliwack Innovation Network, and the University of the Fraser Valley. And then our partners are Cowork, Chilliwack, Currency, and Wisebox. Those are the folks doing the heavy lifting and getting this done and building it up. So I am super pleased to introduce our special guest for this event. Please give a warm Chilliwack.tech welcome to Mel Kaario.
Thank you, Tim. So good to be here.
Yes, Mel is the founder of the Prosperity Accelerator, but we'll get to that in a bit.
Sure.
First things first is this photo. I said, can you give me a photo of when you were a kid, and you took me very literally.
Yeah, I haven't been in the world very long when that photo was taken. In our home, I have a photo of me, and on the other side, of the picture, is one of my wife, Yunsu. She's not very fond of me showing it to people when they come over for dinner, but it's very charming. So there I am.
So you were born and raised in North Vancouver?
That's right. Born and raised in North Vancouver, grew up there, and I had a great childhood and full of lots of fun. I'm the youngest of 4 boys, and I did have a very nice childhood. My wife and I moved out here to Chilliwack in 2007. Yeah.
So I asked you previously about your entrepreneurial background, and you said, well, there was none of that in my family. In fact, my father was almost a communist.
Yeah, no, he was. He was.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, sure. So people often ask, the origin of your last name, what is it? And it's Finnish. And my father grew up in a little town at the north end of Vancouver Island. Some of you might have heard of this little town on Malcolm Island across from Port McNeill called Sointula, which started out really in, I think, around 1918 as a bit of a commune. It was a bit of a cult, quite frankly. They raised kids communally. It was an interesting place. But the government gave this group of Finnish settlers Malcolm Island to squat and develop. My dad, when he was very, very young, moved there with his parents from Finland, and that's where my dad grew up. My dad had some really deep roots in terms of, the labor worker. My grandfather, his father was one of the original 7 members of the United Fishermen and Allied Workers Union. And growing up in our home, my dad was a staunch unionist. He, and as I was telling Tim when we were talking about our time today, my father was a registered card-carrying communist. And I was telling Tim, the FBI, even though my dad was in Canada, in the 60s, the FBI on a few occasions would call our home in North Vancouver asking what my father had been up to. And if any of you might remember a fellow named Harry Rankin, who was a city councilor, Harry Rankin and my dad were like this. And they used to go to, I don't know if it was a story, but they used to go to, down dark alleys in Gastown in the middle of winter on cold, misty nights and go to meetings where communists were gathering.
Well, that was really a time when labor was seen as expendable. The dawn of capitalism and exploitation and so forth. So I can totally see how that could be a huge driving passion. How did that affect you, your family, your siblings? As I mentioned, I had a great childhood. My dad was a really good man. He worked very, very hard. He, I haven't mentioned it, but he was a commercial salmon fisherman. That's how he made his living, and he was very, very good at it. He made a really good living and worked very, very hard, and he was generous. But our life was different than a lot of my friends because, we didn't have summer holidays. I mean, we weren't in school, but when summer holidays started, it was time to go to work. So the idea of summer vacation, and I remember
being somewhat perturbed with my dad because my friends would go camping for a couple of weeks. I had none of that. No camping trips in my childhood didn't exist because my dad was working. And I'm the youngest of 4 boys. My time on the boat started when I was 11. So and all my brothers were all 6, 7 years apart, believe it or not. My oldest brother is 19 years older than me. And some people say, well, that must be planned, because when I had an 18-year-old brother who said, Dad, I'm not going anymore, I'm done. He had an 11-year-old boy ready to go. And so from the age of 11, I went. And by the age of 14, I was a bit fed up with it because my friends were going camping for a couple of weeks, and I was on the boat, and I'd say, Dad, like, what kind of life is this? And he'd say, one day you'll understand none of your friends are experiencing anything like this. And I realized by the time I was 19, at the end of the summer, I'd get home and my friends really didn't have much to say, but boy, did I have stories, things I saw and did. It was a great life.
So this time on the boat actually gave you skills and you became employable, and you were telling me about your experience with Expo 86.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the time on the boat was beautiful. I wouldn't change it for anything in the world. And yeah, Expo 86. So I had enough what they would call logged sea time as a kid and growing up in my early 20s to be able to go to Marine College, and which is really the extent of my post-secondary education for the most part. I went to Marine College in North Vancouver and got my mate's ticket, which qualified me to be a first officer on a coastal within Canadian waters ship, or a third officer on a foreign-going ship, a cruise ship or a freighter. And when I got out of school, it was March, a couple of months before Expo 86 is about to start. The Vancouver Port Corporation needed some people to run some harbor patrol boats, and I got chosen, and it was maybe one of the best summers of my life. They gave us a 26-foot brand new cabin cruiser and say, you look after this, and just fireworks night, keep the people away from the fireworks barge, make sure that, tow people off the rocks in Stanley Park when yachts come in from around the world. It was a great summer.
So I was searching for some imagery of Expo 86, and it brought up some memories. This has nothing to do with you, but but an Expo 86 hack was take your 80-year-old grandma, put her in a wheelchair, and you get front of the line everywhere. Where it sort of fell down was when we took her to the front of the line on her own direction to the front of the Scream Machine, which was their roller coaster. Yeah. We just went right on, and she did this all the way around.
Oh, beautiful. That's beautiful.
But I saw this photo, and that brought back those memories. But so with Expo 86, did you get an opportunity to experience the expo in any way?
Oh, yeah. We were given, season passes. So, but we were all over the harbor all the time, and we had some interesting adventures. Then when I was just mentioning to some folks prior to when the USS Ranger came in, the aircraft carrier came into Vancouver Harbor, there were rumors that it was carrying nukes at the time, and Greenpeace was all over them, in their inflatables, streaking across their bow. And so one of our jobs was to keep them away from the USS Ranger, and that was a hairy day, but it was a great adventure, something I'll never forget.
So that was when you did that and you were done with that job, you went into cell phone sales.
I did. My first endeavor into the business world. So when Expo 86 was over, my dream, and was something that apparently was going to be a possibility, when Expo was over, we were going to roll over us into working for Vancouver Port Corporation, which was really who we were employed by during Expo, Vancouver Port Corporation. And that didn't happen. We got laid off. And I had enough people say to me, Mel, you're a personal character. I think you should go into sales. And I think my dad was a bit perturbed because it wasn't union, and it was iffy in terms of its predictability, in terms of income. But I did. And so, I was selling those beautiful Motorola shoe phones. And incidentally, I don't know if any of you remember, those were $8,000.
I was going to ask, how much?
$8,000, yeah. Yeah, and people bought them. It was a new thing. An innovation, got to be an early adopter. And of course, there was other ones that were called transportables that were in a little suitcase.
Right.
And then the other ones that would get mounted on your transmission thing, on a little stand that would be in your car. But those were $8,000. Yeah.
Well, with each subsequent release of an iPhone, I think Apple is trying to get back to that price.
Yeah. I think that might be true, Tim. Yes.
And around this same time, you met and married your wife, Yinsu.
Yeah.
And she's of Korean descent. Tell me how
Korean
that all
descent.
happened.
Sure. So it was, between working and selling cell phones and meeting Yinsu, I think I had maybe 3 different jobs, of different kinds of sales positions, and it was okay. I won't say that I thrived in any of them. I did okay. I enjoyed the interaction with people, but I didn't really hit any real home runs in terms of financial success. But in 1997, I met Yinsu. So how that happened is I volunteered at a Christian ministry called the Lighthouse Seamen's Mission, which is on the waterfront in North Vancouver, where merchant sailors would come in, and we had a facility where they could come in, play pool, ping pong, and we had great packages where they could call long distance home to their families in the Philippines or Russia. And I worked every other Saturday night. And one particular Saturday, the young fellow that I volunteered with called me and said, Mel, I've got a big exam. He was going to BCIT at the time. Said, I've got a big exam on Monday. I can't come in. But there's a young woman coming to work with you tonight, and she just recently got here from Korea. So my future bride walked in one Saturday evening, and she came here to go to Regent College out at UBC, a theological college. And she sat down, and she knew some English, told me a little about herself, and it was actually her birthday. First thing she said, it's my birthday today. It was January the 13th, I think 1995. And I said, well, happy birthday. And then she was gorgeous, cute, and spunky. And as a matter of fact, she freaks most Korean men out because Korean women are not supposed to be like her. And she won't mind me saying that. I think she holds that as a badge of honor a little bit. And so, yeah, I helped her with her English for a couple of years and showed her around Vancouver, and she did not go home. Her parents were a little dismayed, but they came to our wedding here in Vancouver, and Yinsu says they saw how I was treating her, and they thought, well, it'll be okay.
Nice.
So yeah, it's a good story.
Nice.
And we just had our 25th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
So the next chapter in this story is you were employee number 1 at a tech startup called Think.
That's right.
And it was in the learning business.
That's right.
Tell us about that.
Exactly. So I mentioned that I had a few sales jobs, and a couple of them were, they were okay. When Yinsu and I got married, I had a particular, I was working at a company, had been for about a year, and it was not terribly exciting, kind of like, you got your cubicle, 100 dials a day, do it, just time, day after day. Really kind of uninteresting. I met a fella that we were going to church with who had, in 1990, not maybe 6 months after we had been married, it was 1997, and he told me about this business that he and a friend of his had started in the basement of a house up by Cleveland Dam in North Van. And I thought, well, this sounds interesting. I had never been on the internet, had never sent an email. I knew diddly about it, really. But he said, Mel, we need someone to do some selling for us. And we talked about it a little bit, and I left my job. I went to work for them in the basement of their house. And actually, initially, Tim, it was called Training Net. And
Great.
What it was, some of you might remember, it was early days. All it was really was an online directory of any kind of company on the planet that did any kind of training at all. My job was to sell banner ads or priority placement in their category. That was my job.
It seemed like every startup at the time said, let's put the yellow pages on the internet.
Yeah, for something or other. That's exactly right. I think that was about it.
And so you had to obviously educate potential clients that were putting money into print and saying there's this thing. And,
that's right. That's exactly right. I wasn't particularly good at it, but it only lasted 2 months. I mentioned I had never been on the internet before. I got the job and I went to night school to learn how to send an email and how to use Internet Explorer. That was the beginning of that, and I had been there maybe 2 months, and I was in the basement of their house, and the phone rings. Had been a fella from Boston is calling. His name is Dave Egan. You can look him up online. Dave won't mind me saying so. Dave says, hi, I have 2 partners. And back then, I don't know how they did it, how they could figure it out. But they knew that we had a lot of traction. We were getting tens of thousands of visitors, unique visitors at that time in 1997. And they say, I have 2 partners. We want to invest some money and take it off in a different direction. Let me speak to the owner. So I gave them the phone. They flew out to Vancouver within 2 weeks. Invested $2 million into the business. And one of the other 2 guys actually was a guy by the name of Hemang Davi, who created Lotus Notes. And these 3 guys flew out and invested $2 million, kind of tweaked the business model a bit, and within 3 years, we were 350 people. And I was the first one, which was just...
So doing the math on that's right in the .com.
Yeah, .com madness.
And pets.com and this and that, and then the cliff on the other side.
And $76 million invested into that business.
But it seems like this was a real business. It wasn't just vapor.
Yeah, that's right. It wasn't.
What was essentially the product? What did it morph into?
Sure. So as I mentioned, we were called TrainingNet. It later became something called Think with a Q. Learning solutions. And what these 3 fellows wanted to do is we took it off into the direction of creating learning management systems. So what we did was we created company corporate intranets, and clients were U.S. Navy, Harley Davidson, Visa, HP was a client. And so back then, the buzzword was human capital, right? In the late 90s, early 2000s. And so we would build these corporate intranets and provide all the servers. Each sale was multiple millions of dollars. And we would put it on, create an intranet for them, and to track all their employee certifications. When this new certification needed to happen, they'd get delivered all their content online. And back then, it was just the beginning of online learning, right? It was just booming right then. And my job, which was crazy because I had never done it before, they said, Mel, you're going to look after big portions of our sales department. You're going to hire people, write sales manuals, and your job, the department, is call companies that do training, and we want to resell their courses on the intranet, and we'll take a piece, they'll get a piece, and the company who we create the intranet for will pay for that training. So we had MIT we were selling courses in their post-secondary education, continuing education, London School of Economics, Stanford, as well as a myriad of other companies. It was a lot of fun.
Wow.
We were running around with our hair on fire, it was just, it doesn't exist, but let's just make it happen,
And so the eventual end or culmination of that was, like many startups, they were acquired.
Yes,
and
that's
that
right.
was a company called Saba. And interestingly, when I tried searching for Saba, they've recently been acquired by another company, and are somewhat erasing this brand. So it's just the fish gobbles the fish, gobbles the fish, right?
That's right. We got acquired. Saba was our biggest competitor at the time, and they ended up acquiring us. And that's right, Tim. It was just actually not long after 9/11, we got acquired. And the office that we had in North Vancouver, which was about 12 people in a sales department and probably about 70 people. Oh, pardon me. Someone's calling me. This is a big faux pas.
It could be Saba. We're talking about them.
That's right. Maybe they want to make my shares worth something today. But we got acquired, and then they started laying people off. They didn't need so many people in the North Vancouver office. I knew it was coming months, maybe 6 months before.
We glazed over it pretty quickly, but to go from a startup of 2 founders and 1 employee to 350, what were some of the big chapters within that, like the growing pains, and like you're thrust into a role that you don't know anything about, and I would imagine many people were. Was it?
Yeah, the head office ended up being in Bedford, just outside of Boston, which is where the 3 big investors were, and that was where the bulk of the employees were. And we had a few satellite offices around. The funny thing is, as I look back, in the department that I worked in, there wasn't much in the way of pain or stress or anxiety. It was just like euphoria, quite frankly.
Wow.
It was beautiful.
Because I'm picturing everybody's seen the movie Office Space.
Yeah.
And Mel filling out TPS forms, giving them to the management consultant, and it sounds like that didn't exist.
No, it was great. And part of what may have contributed to maybe the downfall of the company, I'm not sure they were really fiscally as responsible as we were. As I was telling you like a few days ago, we would go to trade shows, and like I remember one trade show in Dallas, we took 27 people, and it was just like the booth was as big as the space in here, and it was just a big, massive show. We're bigger than you, and I'm not sure we spent our money as well as we could have, but my department was just beautiful. It was wonderful. It was the kind of place where you had a job to do. You could come in at 10:30 in the morning. Nobody asked a question. As long as you got the job done, you might go home at dinner and come home back till 9 o'clock. Just get the work done. There's no you got to be here at 8:30. There was none of that. It was beautiful, and it was one of those .com things. There was mountain bikes leaning up against desks, and if you came in a little bit too gussied up in terms of your dress, the VP would say, "Go home and get changed, man. Like you're messing with the culture in here." Because people were wearing flip-flops and shorts. It was developer heaven.
So after the acquisition and some turmoil, you said the writing was on the wall, and you had that fateful meeting where they said, "It's not you, it's me." Yeah,
that's right. They, I knew it was coming because they started laying off developers and programmers. And I could, and then they laid off some of the people in our sales department. And so I knew it was coming, and maybe 5-6 months before it did. And I was ready for it. And in fact, I think kind of in my soul, I was almost kind of just ready for a change, And on that day that it did happen, the fella that I worked for in the basement of his house, that fella became a VP because he was one of the original owners. And his name's Amar. And Amar, just a lovely guy. He had some tears in his eyes. He came and knocked on my desk and said, "Mel, we got to go to the boardroom." And I knew exactly what was going to happen. And as we're walking to the boardroom, he starts to sob, and I'm okay because I knew it was coming. And I don't think he really knew that I knew it was coming, but it was very hard on him. And so we gave each other some hugs, and they gave me a very, very generous severance package for 6 months with full benefits as the first guy in the company. He said, "Just go and think of what you want to do. We'll give you a long runway to figure it out."
And figuring it out, how did that happen? Did you want to go back into that type of role or something completely different?
Well, I think it was working there really lit the entrepreneurial bug in me. Even though, I was an employee, I think most of the people there were indeed, I guess you could use the word intrapreneurs. We were creating things that didn't exist, and if you created something that the company thought they could use, well, wonderful, let's run with it. So I knew at that point when I was in my mid-30s then, and there was no way in the world I was going to go work. At least that's what I was thinking. I had no interest in going and working for someone else, and then maybe 10 years later, have that happen again. I had no interest in it. So I used, at that time we were living in North Vancouver, and interestingly enough, I spent many days out here fishing in the Chilliwack River, thinking, pondering, meditating, praying. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I realized that, I know I can sell, and I don't mind selling. And I don't really know how I found them, but I found a company based in Las Vegas that was an early SaaS program, and they were looking for resellers, and the compensation package was quite generous. And really what it was a drag and drop website builder, and really cutting edge for like 2002. It had SEO, e-commerce enabled.
So this is the dawn of Web 2.0.
Yeah.
You were rocking a MySpace page, I bet.
Yeah.
Like with
that's
the
right.
dancing Mel animated GIF.
Something like that. That's right.
And you had a taste of the internet, so it sounded like that. You knew that was the future.
Yeah. I started I went and bought a $2,300 laptop, because that's how much they cost back then, and of course they didn't cost that much more now, but at a local shop, and I started in the basement of my house with a phone and a laptop, and I started cold calling to sell this thing, and I quickly learned I liked getting paid in US dollars, and back then it was 68 cents for the Canadian dollar, so it was nice getting paid in American funds. And I just started cold calling to sell this to small businesses. I called New Jersey and New York for a while, figured out, no, I don't like talking to those people, they're way too intense. I just focused on Texas and Georgia, because they were nice. They were kind of like Canadians in a way. They'd talk about, you're from Canada. Like, you like fishing? And we'd talk about fishing and barbecue before we got to business. And I'm not really exaggerating. They were like that, and they were a joy to talk with. And I built it up, cold calling. And I built it up to about 175 monthly customers with reoccurring revenue. And it was good. And then we moved to Chilliwack. Yeah.
Because you could do this job from anywhere. Essentially, right?
Anywhere. And that was, I was just saying over a glass of wine prior to, it was a revelation to me around 2002. I dawned on me, I could be anywhere. I could be doing this anywhere. And that was exciting to me. Yeah. Yeah.
So you did this for half a dozen years, or?
Yeah, it was probably 2002, 2003. And in 2007, we moved here to Chilliwack, and I think right around when we moved here, I knew something wasn't quite right. And my wife, Yinsu, knew it before I did, because most days, not long after lunch, 1 or 2 o'clock, I started to, I guess you could say, disengage from the workday, mentally, emotionally. I just felt like I needed a nap for about an hour. And I knew something was wrong. And she encouraged me a little bit to go back to school to become a pastor. And I thought, I'm not sure I want to do that. But I met a woman in my neighborhood who was studying to become a coach. And I talked to her about it. She told me what it was. And, coaching is such a broad term, as most people know. I kind of had a bit of an idea, but she explained it really with great clarity, and I thought, that's what I want to do. So I started to wind down my business. I found a company and an institute in Brisbane in Australia, and it was a 2-year course. So I started, and I did it in about 18 months, pedal to the metal, and started to wind down my SaaS business. And
so what does that look like? Is that like an accredited program where you come out with?
Yeah. So it was, some people may know that there is a world governing body for coaches called the International Coach Federation. And so the institute that I went to was an accredited institute by the ICF. So you got out and ICF would say, okay, this character has learned and experienced what he needs to learn and experience to become a coach under our guidance and our stipulations. So that's what I did. And, so I got out, and I'm not sure if I was being lazy or not, but I never really did pursue. After you get out, you can pursue an actual certifications and get higher certifications, ICF certifications. I did never pursue it. I needed to log how many hours I did of paid coaching. I never did it because I did talk to some other coaches that told me that unless you're going to work for a company, no one will ever ask you if you have ICF accreditation. And that has proven to be true. Other than one person in the last 10 years, no one has ever asked me, did you go to school? Are you certified to do this? No one cared. Can you just help? That's what they really wanted to know.
So you go through this training.
Yeah.
How do you get your first coaching client?
Yeah. My first coaching client. Well, we had, as part of our practicum, we had to coach fellow students. I got coached, we got coached. And, this is early days of Zoom. It's 2007, 2008. And I'm in class with other students. It's a global student body. And there was a woman in there from California. I guess she thought some of the things I said in class were interesting or thought-provoking, and she got in touch with me between class. He was the first client I ever had, and she said, Mel, my future son-in-law needs coaching, and I think you're the guy.
That sounds like a trap.
Yeah. It does, doesn't it? You better perform or else, because she's going to marry my daughter. But anyway, I coached him, and it was just a tremendous experience. And he and I'm thankful for it because he has gone on to win Grammy Awards, Cannes Film Awards, like half dozen of them, as a young film director. And he says to this day that some of it, you have a lot to do with that, which was very satisfying for me. But he
walk me through that first conversation.
Sure.
My future mother-in-law says I need to do coaching from you to marry her daughter.
No, it wasn't quite like that. It was more like he was ready for it. Like he was. I think he might have even talked to her about it, and we got matched up together. But he was a bit of a sphere of influence. He was from Nova Scotia, directing in L.A., and he had friends doing interesting things all over North America, and he just said, "Hey, you need to talk to Mel. My buddy in Toronto, call Mel. My buddy in Portland, you need to talk to Mel." And it started to take off from there.
It sounds like so much of your success has come from just the person you are. You're easy to talk to. You can walk into a kitchen and strike up a conversation.
Oh, thank you, Tim. Yeah.
And just that word of mouth is powerful.
Yeah.
And so when did you actually name this? I'm a little unclear because this is the name of your company.
Yes.
The Prosperity Accelerator. Was it around that time, right off the bat, or a little bit later?
That is probably 2 years old.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah. So prior to that, that logo just had Mel Kaario above it, but the same tagline.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. Love your life, thrive in business. And, when I started coaching, I didn't think I'd be coaching entrepreneurs, business people. I wanted to coach just men with life challenges, life dreams that they had. And it started to take on a life of its own. And I can't really remember how or why, but after about 6-8 months, I started, somehow they just kind of came at me in some way, shape, or form. Business people, entrepreneurs, professionals, accountants, the odd lawyer here and there. Mm-hmm. And interestingly enough, I'm going to say over the last, since I started, only maybe 20% of my clients have been within Canada. They're in Europe, they're in America, and they come mostly through referral. Mm-hmm. Where the Prosperity Accelerator, where that came from is, in asking clients or potential clients, as we're getting to know each other a little bit and finding out if it's a good fit and see if I can help, I would ask them, what is it that inspired you to become a lawyer? or to start this business? And it was rarely answered with a lot of clarity. Most of the time, especially for the professionals, they were thinking, well, I had a good opportunity to maybe make a lot of money. It was often the pursuit of financial abundance, maybe the opportunity to own some nice things in a nice home. And from time to time, I think some of them were in love with the idea of, some form of status. I've got a number of letters on my business card. It was a variable of those things most often. And then I would ask, well, why am I talking to you? And they said, well, despite all of that, Mel, I'm not particularly sure that I made a right choice. Or why am I disinterested in what I do? I've been a lawyer for 9 years. I'm even a partner. Why am I somewhat disinterested? And it resonated with me because I had been there. I knew what that felt like. And so I began to, study this a little bit. Part of my process was right in the beginning, and it had been since the beginning of my coaching, I would help everyone figure out what their values were. Like, what is really important to you?
Right.
And what I've discovered over the years is that things like stress, frustration, anxiety, maybe even a little bit of depression in terms of like situational depression, like life is not meaningful, those are symptoms of a life misaligned with what is important to you. And unless we know what it is, we can just choose a profession or a business that takes us off in a direction when maybe I really should have gone that way.
You shared this graph with me.
Yeah.
And this is sort of where your thinking has gone.
Yeah.
Describe to us what this is all about.
Sure. So, I have become, I guess, a real passionate student of understanding the importance of knowing your values. We all know that businesses have values, and most good businesses, well-run businesses, have values, but people do as well. 9 out of 10 people are not really sure they have them. So the default future is one where it's a life where we're just kind of going with the flow. It's often kind of an uninspired life. You get a laptop out of the box. It's got its default settings, no custom settings, and you just kind of go with it. Well, lots of us in life are doing the same thing. The days go by, we get our paycheck, we run our business, we pay our mortgage, we raise our children, and then one day we're 74 and think, what in the world just happened? And that's a sad thing. So if I could, I'll tell a quick little story. Sure. About a fellow that I coached not long ago and who was living the default future. I'll call him Joe. He was referred to me, lives in Northern California, just outside Sacramento. And Joe and I had a phone call, a Zoom call, and I said, so Joe, what's your story after we built some rapport? And he said, well, Mel, I am 34 years old. I've been an accountant. I work for one of the big four. We have one of those big four accounting firms in our town here. You might know who that is. He said, my career's on the rise. I have a beautiful home in a beautiful suburb. I'm 34. The home is almost already paid off. I drive a big black Audi SUV. My wife drives a BMW X5. I got 2 beautiful kids. My career's on the rise. Sunday afternoon, I'm sick to my stomach because I got to go do it again. And his exact words were, what the hell is wrong with me? People keep saying, oh man, you're so successful, Joe. What's wrong? And we talk a little bit, and I say, okay, Joe. I said, what drove you to become an accountant? He said, my dad's an accountant. And my dad has always been my hero. He's a great dad, raised us well. He gave us lots of love and generosity. And when I was in high school, and as a senior, I said, Dad, what am I going to do when I grow up? And we just had this father-dad conversation. And he said, son, well, why don't you become an accountant like me? And it seemed like a good idea at the time, His dad gave them a great life. So he went through, got his MBA, became an accountant, became a CPA, became an accountant. Now he's 7 years into his life and careers went up. He didn't mind being an accountant, as it turned out. What he did not like was going to that office every day in a suit and tie, being in the boardroom, around people he didn't really connect well with, other accountants. And I said, Joe, well, what did you love growing up? He said, he got a little excited. You could just tell by his body language. He said, as soon as I was old enough to, grade 12 and through college, I spent every weekend I could in Yosemite Park by myself with a backpack and a fishing rod, listening to the birds, the wind in the trees, fishing in places that were really remote, all by myself. That's what I loved. And clearly there is a disconnect here, right? And so we spent some time, helped him discover his values, which were freedom, adventure, solitude, very little of which he got to experience working for that big accounting firm. So he left, and what he did was, he's still an accountant today, but what he does is he serves wilderness fishing lodges and boutique hotels and cool places that he gets to go and visit them. So he gets to enjoy what he deeply values, just with some tweaks, enjoying his values, living a life aligned with what's important to him, but he's still an accountant. So that can be the power of understanding what you really, really love.
Got it.
Yeah.
So that leads to this click, which you call the created life.
The created life, which is what we ended up doing with Joe. So the created life becomes possible when you know what's deeply important to you in terms of your values. When you know what they are, then you can make all the best decisions, such as, what's the best career for me? What's the best degree, if I should even go to university? What's the best business for me? Does my future spouse or the person I'm committing my life to, do they have the similar values to me? When you know what your values are, you can make all the very best decisions. And then once you see them, you can create strategy for the rest of your life to bring them all into your life in abundance. And that is the prosperity accelerator. That's why I changed to call it that. And a lot of people will say, well, you're talking money. It could be that, but I love the Hebrew term shalom, which is a greeting. It's also a goodbye, and there's some a few definitions of it. But in short, what shalom means is nothing missing, nothing broken. And if you have everything in your life most important to you, that is a life of nothing missing, nothing broken. Money might be a definition, but I've done this now close to 200 times with different people over the last 10 years. And many of them were chasing money, and I'm going to say a number of them have had their mouth hanging open at the end of the process, saying, there's no mention of money here anywhere. Oh my goodness. And I've had grown men sobbing. I even get a little emotional about it, which is why I love to do it. Because people discover this is amazing. There's no mention of money here. And
I've never had a coach.
Yeah.
And listening to you, and I'm oversimplifying, but it sounds somewhere in between therapy and management consultant in a sense, and somewhere guide of some sort.
Yes, sure.
And you mentioned that you've tended towards male entrepreneurial types of some sort.
Yeah.
And that's where you've carved out your niche, where you get your name passed around. And
and I have mostly I have worked with men, but I certainly have with a number of women too. I don't really seek them out, but I just recently took 4 stay-at-home single moms through this. We did it on Zoom, and I took them through it, and it was beautiful for all of us, as they saw the potential of a life they didn't think was possible. Because I go really, really, really deep. And at the end, people often see a life that they couldn't imagine they could have. And it's very exciting to people. If I could just mention one quick thing that I'd forgotten to mention about the default life. Actually, I'll hold on to that thought, Tim.
Sure.
You keep going.
If you were deeply honest with yourself and you did your own self-assessment, which you're never supposed to do, but where would you plot your created life at this point? Are you like living the pinnacle and this is exactly where you want to be?
You know, it's a wonderful question, Tim. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being I've got it all, I'm going to say that I'm probably at about a 7. Yeah, about a 7. If COVID had not existed, it would be maybe an 8 or higher. And the reason I say that is, so my values, if I can just quickly mention them, are in this point of order. In this order, they are adventure, community, solitude, my personal health, leadership, freedom, and security. Adventure, much like my friend Joe, the accountant, is at the top of the list. And adventure for me, part of that deep description is I need to spend 2 months of the year on another continent and eating in funky restaurants that only locals go to, where it's loud and the food is good. I haven't been able to do that for a few years, so it's a little lower. Yeah, but that's part of my description. But I'm at about a 7, yeah, which feels pretty good.
And I know prior to COVID, you were doing some mastermind groups.
Yeah, I was.
And that was essentially applying your practice to a group of folks?
That's exactly right. I had a couple of groups meeting in our home, and I had a couple virtual as well. So about 2 years prior to COVID, my wife Yunsu and I, we had a suite in our house, and I realized that I wanted to run some mastermind groups, and why I love that is I love community. And I was just totally energized by the idea. I had done some a few years previous, but I decided that we're going to run an Airbnb. Our tenant left, and we spent a few $1,000s and upscaled our suite a little bit, and I was running 2 groups a month in there, 2 groups of 6, and I would walk them through my process as part of my service to them. That was a lot of fun. Then COVID hit, and we kind of we wound up. Actually, they both actually finished, but they were delayed for a year until Bonnie said we could meet again. Yeah. But a great time. It was a lot of fun.
So you mentioned this common values piece, and this is a form that you use to try and help people identify some of those values.
That's right. This list has over 150 values on it. Now, people often say, oh, I know my values. They're things like kindness and honesty and integrity, which very well may be, truly there are values, but those are kind of societal values, right? Most of us think that most of us should value those things. And ideally, I think maybe if we're healthy people, we value generosity and kindness and honesty and integrity. But interestingly enough, most people don't understand that our values are starting to form probably around the time we're 4, up until we're maybe early mid-20s. And those are, people take on these societal values, but it's very likely that those are not truly their values. Some of them might be, generosity and things like that. But I have a series of 8 questions that most people take 2 to 3 hours to go through on their own. And then I'll get together with them, and then I'm going to help them dig down and attribute some values to the answers to those questions. And we're going to drill it down and drill it down and drill it down and get into their top 7. And then they're going to order them in order of importance, which is important. And then once they've got those 7, and let's say adventure is one of them, then I'm going to ask them to write a very deep story, as much as they can, on what it would look like for Tim to have adventure, all he can handle in his life. What would it look like at a 10 out of 10 for Tim? They do that for all their 7 values, and it's at that point they look at it and they go, wow, that is an amazing life. 7 most important areas of my life. That looks amazing. And then that's when I will say, let's go get it. And because if your life is at 8s and 9s, life is amazing. Your business is amazing. Your career is amazing. Your relationships are amazing. That's my process. And that's when you have nothing missing, nothing broken, prosperity.
Well, I want to get to some audience questions because But you had given me this piece, and this is sort of words to live by that you can follow.
That's right. And so that Brian Tracy, some of you might know him. He is a very well-known author, written over 80 books, inspirational speaker. So what Brian, that's an old quote of Brian's, and he's saying that, whenever we feel stress, tension, frustration, anxiety, those are symptoms of a life or moments that are out of alignment with our values, right? As an example, if you value security and the place you work, there's threats of layoffs, or the business isn't doing so well, they've missed a few paychecks, and you've got a mortgage to pay, that is a threat to your security, and you're going to be stressed and anxious, right? But I would like to just mention one thing. There is a very well-known psychologist, written a number of books. His name is Stephen Stosny, and he also contributes to Psychology Today, a medical journal, writes in there often. He said just not long ago, maybe a year and a half ago, as I was reading it, he said that whenever we are encountering dark emotions on the negative side of the fence, we're almost always either unaware of or inattentive to our values, what's most important. So if we're ever, if we're feeling low, off, or any time, similar to what Brian says here, anytime we're feeling low or off, we are inattentive to the things that are really important to us. And he said if it goes on long enough, we're very likely to sink into some sort of depression. So as an extension of that, think about if we're inattentive to our values and we sink into a depression, or we're anxious and stressful, how does that impact my health, with cortisol being released into my body? That causes all sorts of things. How would that impact if I'm married or attached to someone? How does that impact my relationship with that person? I'm just unaware of or inattentive to my values. And that impacts maybe the life of my kids. I come home and I'm just glum, stressed, not playing with my kids, not interested. That is all comes about being inattentive to our values. Now, on the flip side, if we know what they are and we bring them into our life and we go after them and make sure we have them, now I'm getting up in the morning with some fire in my belly. My kids see mom and dad is excited about life. They're actually smiling. And wouldn't it be wonderful for a marriage or a relationship if both husband and wife were attentive to their values and they both love life? What a great household that would be. That's actually, I just gave you my altruistic desire, what my mission is for people to live really, really well, because it impacts communities, neighborhoods, families. Thank you.
Yes. Well, with that, let's give a round of applause to Mel for sharing.
Thank you.
And I planted a mic with Colin out there, so he gets the first
Colin.
question.
Thanks, Mel. Mic's on?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, thanks, Mel, so much for sharing. Just curious, because not everybody watching this video later would know that this particular meetup and the format of what we have here today was actually started when you started a Startup Grind chapter here in Chilliwack, and we're grateful for that. We'd just love to hear from you. What led you to that decision?
To start Startup Grind in Chilliwack. Sure. Thanks, Colin. Actually, a coach that I know very well, who lives in Napa, California, had been doing one for about a year. And I would speak with him regularly, and his name is Jay Rook. And he doesn't do it anymore, but he did it for years. And Jay and I talked regularly about life, building business, and serving clients. And Jay has similar values to me, which is probably why we got along so well, because hours would disappear when we'd get on the phone. And he told me regularly, fairly often, he said, Mel, you need to do this. You need to do this in Chilliwack. And I think he'd been telling me that for maybe 7-8 months. And that was the inspiration behind it, right? And of course, I loved entrepreneurship and being a great lover also of community. And also having just really recently moved to Chilliwack, I wanted to dig deeper into community in Chilliwack, and that's really what inspired me to begin that, Colin. Yeah, and it was great. It was a great time for sure. Yeah.
That's a good point. Thanks, Colin, for mentioning that. And then, of course, I took over that and are continuing with this. So your legacy lives on.
Oh, hallelujah. Okay. Nice to hear.
Any other questions?
What percentage of people that you coach actually find their path to prosperity?
Thanks very much for that question. So, as mentioned, prosperity is not always money, right? But what does happen for people is that at the end of the process that I take them through, they are going to see in full description as they write it out what an amazing life would look like for them. And most often after that, Calvin, I'm going to say probably 7 out of 10 people will say, Mel, now that you have shown me what my amazing, prosperous life can look like, meaning fulfilling and meaningful, probably 7 out of 10 of them say, I need help to do this. Because if you don't help me, there's a very good chance I'll just default back into my old way of living. So probably 7 out of 10 of them would ask me for some help, which might end up being, meeting weekly, maybe bi-weekly for a time, and then maybe after a number of months, we just maybe meet once a month. But most of the time, they need some gentle, loving accountability. Once in a while, someone to hold a fire under their rear end. But ICF, the International Coaching Federation, would say that, and some of you may know this, they would say, a pure coaching session is you're not giving advice, you give no opinions, you just let the client do 80% of the talking. Well, what I've discovered is that is, for the most part, bunk. And most coaches who are doing amazing things in the world, because they have experience, they will just say, listen, you need to stop that, you need to do this, this is why, and because I've seen many clients or other people do this, so this is what you need to do. And most clients are appreciative of that, because why would they want to pay for 5 sessions to figure it out on my own? You can just tell me what to do, right? So I'm going to say 7 out of 10, are probably today living a life that they absolutely love. Yeah, probably 7 out of 10 of them. And I take great joy, and right out of nowhere, like the guy who's won Grammy Awards, I haven't talked to him personally for years, but I'll just send him a text every once in a while and say, hey, what are you doing? What are you dreaming about? And as I did it just a couple of months ago, and he responded to say, well, I'm not entirely comfortable to tell you what I'm dreaming about, but I am dreaming about my next, he does music videos for people like Drake and Keith Urban and people like that. And so I take great joy in staying in their life with a text or a phone call from time to time. But I'm going to say probably 7 out of 10 achieve it, possess it. I won't let them go otherwise. I keep on them. Yeah.
So right now you were, dealing with entrepreneurs and that type of thing. But I can see that your goal of prosperity really has nothing to do with money. We need money to live.
It could be, yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily make us happy.
Yeah.
So how do you see yourself evolving? You're getting older, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so are you looking at... you have a huge sense of community. Yeah. But of course you also have to make your own money. Yeah. So do you see yourself moving into different areas?
Yeah, thank you. A lovely question. I will say I make a pretty good living. I don't work terribly hard because I do so enjoy what I do, and I am getting older, but I have zero interest, quite frankly, in retiring, because what I do, I'm having the time of my life, quite frankly, and impacting people's lives is just a joy to me. I do have this internal struggle from time to time where the default life yells at me saying, you need to make make a name for yourself. You need to maybe make more money or something. Because I hear the voices out there screaming at me, right? This is what success is, right? And I battle it off, you know. I am an avid journaler, which is what I teach and insist my clients while they're working with me, they must journal. And so that gives me clarity because I journal probably 2 or 3 times a week. If I don't really, I'll share my dreams with you. Maybe I'll do that. I dream about speaking in front of people who are graduating from university and telling them what I'm sharing tonight, so that they don't chase money. There's nothing wrong with money. I love doing really well. I love living in abundance. Besides, if I'm going to spend 2 months a year on another continent, I need to be making some money, right? But I would love to be speaking around the world on this subject, you know, redefining what success is, and you know, smashing the world's default definition of success, of money, stuff, and status, you know. I mean, we think about success, and, you know, we think about, you know, people who are building a business, they've grown a big business, you know, and the people will look at that person and say, gosh, that person's successful, look at you, but they might be miserable, but they got all the exterior stuff. But my heart goes out to the people who don't have that, but maybe some person who works getting people off the street and off addiction. And they live in a little studio, they rent a studio apartment, a vacation for them is maybe camping at Harrison Hot Springs on the weekend. But they go to bed every night thinking, today I did something wonderful. And that person is prosperous, in my opinion. That person who has all that stuff, but they're unhappy, they might be miserable. That's not a successful person. But that person who goes to bed every night just on fire because he or she's just, oh man, today was amazing. I did amazing things. That's a prosperous person. So I'd love people to hear that message, you know, because all that money, stuff, and status, if you're aligned with your values and you've got that, awesome. Congratulations. But if you're not, you've missed the mark. The people who are loving their life, doing small things that nobody knows about, that's a prosperous person. So I would like to get that message out to more people. Yeah. That's great. Yeah, thanks.
Well, thanks, Mel. That's a wonderful message, and hopefully everybody is inspired and fired up to live that inspired life, and appreciate your sharing.
Thank you. I was going to mention, just because I do love to do this, if any of the people in the audience tonight, or you know someone that is feeling stressed, anxious, frustrated, maybe even a little depressed about their life, their business, their career, or they have big decisions coming up they want some clarity on, I'd like to offer to do this for a couple of people. They'll take a couple hours by themselves, a couple of hours with me, but in the end they'll see some clarity in a life that they maybe have never seen before. So I'm happy to do that with a couple of people. They can reach out to me if they like. You can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn. Okay. As long as you can remember to spell my name right, you can find me. But I'd like to offer this for a couple of people. No charge whatsoever, because it's a joy to me to do.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's hear it from Mel. So that's the Chilliwack Tech Meetup. We have another monthly event that we do called Creative Third Thursdays, and that's where you can meet creative folks, much like this group, a little more on the creative side. And it's primarily at Cowork Chilliwack about 8 times a year, but we also do some field trips. People say, well, when is that? And I'm quick to point out it's on the 3rd Thursday of the month. So check out that. And it is a free event sponsored by SEPCO and Cowork Chilliwack. So do participate. And then, of course, the Chilliwack.tech meetup. It's every 3rd Tuesday, and where you can mix and mingle with entrepreneurs and share your business stories and so forth. So thank you very much for coming, and that's another one in the can.
Thank you.